So I wanted to share with you a couple of thoughts about building small, because as I said, it's been a bit of a life's work, and it really sets the stage for what we're going to be talking about over the next 48 hours. And the book came out, it was published in April. Response has been really overwhelming in terms of both people saying, I've been waiting for this has been so inspirational, it's been so helpful. Doing a lot of lectures at colleges now and as a way to get students to think differently about a career in real estate and what their potential can be. But the reason for the book, as it says in there, was really to elevate the conversation about why and how we build. And it wasn't necessarily to disparage big, but to talk about the value of smaller, finer grained development as either an alternative or an additive way to attract or adjust the built environment and what we can do in our careers. So it's not small as a stepping stone to being a big developer. Small is a long-term career path, and everybody here, I think, has chosen that path. But a big part of it, so April, how many months that's been, a big part continues to be what is small? What is this thing? And for the quants in the room, it's always about how many square feet and how many dollars. And I think as I've been coming to talk about it more and go to see people, which for me, it's really that subjective, qualitative thing that hopefully you'll see and feel over the next 48 hours. It's really about experience. It's about additive to the community. It's about transformation in a positive way. And if you remember this diagram from the book, if you haven't seen this, but what we're saying is that for so long, the industry has focused in that upper right-hand quadrant, which is large-scale master plan projects using corporate and institutional money. And that's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, the money, we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the challenges of raising money for small projects. The money is attracted to that because it's more efficient, it's easier to deploy it, feels less risky because there's a big institutional developer behind it that has the machine to develop it. But we know what the impacts of that can be, and many times if that's the only solution in cities. The other thing about the large and master plan, and this is a little bit of my soapbox, is I think the codes and the public and the regulations have gotten so oriented and so onerous that unless you're doing a large master plan project, it's very hard to navigate. And the large master plan stuff requires highly prescriptive outcomes, which doesn't allow the flexibility, the spontaneity, the experimentation that really is what small is all about. So we've almost moved the regulatory environment to force us to do bigger projects when what we're really trying to do in this room, I think, are smaller projects where we can learn and evolve and help create places that evolve over time. So the thesis back in 2015, when this graphic was first developed, was there's an opportunity in the marketplace, there's an opportunity for people in careers, and there's really a need in our cities to get more capital and more intellectual capital and more chutzpah focused in that lower left-hand quadrant. But I've summarized this. I did a talk the other day in town here. We're doing, in partnership with the Mill District, we're doing a series called the Design Dialogues, and it's about what makes this place special. And it was an idea to try and get people in the community, instead of always complaining about what's going wrong in town, embrace what's special about this place and use that as a platform to continue to grow and have positive, constructive conversations about what we want to be as opposed to what we don't want to be. But at the end of it, I was talking to somebody, and it came down to this thing that small is not about scale. It's about scale, but it's not about size and numbers. It's as much about, are you pursuing real estate as a commodity or in order to build community? And it really is that notion of using real estate as a vessel to create community, to create experiences, and really create places that endure and evolve, as opposed to treating it as just another asset class where somebody with a remote spreadsheet is feeding capital into it and evaluating when it's time to buy and hold and sell. So, Lorenzo, thank you for that great picture. And then in Chicago at the fall meeting at ULI, they announced their new vision, or a mission statement and set of values. And I thought this is so perfectly aligned with all the stuff that we've been talking about for 9 years, this idea of transformative impact in the built environment. I mean, that's what we've seen and what we're all committed to and doing. And then they had these three, the three priorities. The top one, very wonkish term, but decarbonizing real estate, which I got to say, it was amazing to see this in front of 3,000 people come up on the screen, because I was saying to somebody, in 2007, there were a number of us that went to the Board of Trustees at ULI. Molly, you were there, right? And it was called the CLUE Committee, and we were talking about the need for ULI to step up and take a leadership role in climate change, and there were a number of board members that said, we don't talk about climate change. That's not an issue here. That's not something we believe in. And so now this is like the number1 priority, decarbonizing the real estate. So I was like, kudos to them. Increasing housing attainability. A lot of the small stuff, Dan Perolik and Alex from Opticos Design, who wrote the Missing Middle book, a lot of discussion, and interesting discussion around this intersection of small and missing middle and affordable by design housing. So there's this kind of thing that's going on where all of these ideas are starting to coalesce. But the thing that I was really excited about is educating the next generation of diverse real estate leaders. And I think the thing that I've said when we were talking about the importance of this program and ULI to fund the expansion of this content via video taping and all of that, is this is the entry point for so many developers working in their communities, disinvested communities, and developers of color, women-owned businesses that are coming into this business. This is where they want to be. And if they truly want to lead and they truly want to expand the depth of their profession, this is a key entry point that needs to be supported. So I was really glad to see this, and I think it fits well with what we've been doing for years. So I want to take a few minutes before our panel and just give you some context. We usually try when we go to a town to give you, a high-level view of what's going on in town or what's important about the town. And I know some of you had a chance. So how many were here yesterday and just got a chance to walk around, experience the place? Kind of cool, isn't it? So I wanted to give you a little bit of background and context. So hopefully over the next 48 hours, you're going to hear a number of things. Probably from our different speakers, you'll hear a number of themes. But it's always good for me to just kind of get that big mental map of what's going on and what's important. So, and one of the things that I wanted to start with, this was given to me when I was down in San Antonio. Ed Cross gave me this book called Charleston Fancy, and written by, I'm not even going to try to say his name, but if you know this writer, he's done some amazing work, great books. But he had this phrase in like the second page of the book, and it just so caught my eye. I guess, because it was like what we'd been trying to say about small and what I felt about this place. And it's, how successful places are produced intricately, slowly, and lovingly by individuals, one piece at a time. And that's what we do, and that's what this town is about. So quick by the numbers, because we are some quants. So anyways, founded in 1857. Somebody asked, population's 12,000. We got about 5,000 housing units. Depending on when this is a little bit old data, but one of the things that I think is pretty surprising about this town is about 30% of the people who live here actually work in town, because there's a lot about, out-migration for jobs and being a bedroom community and all that, but there actually is a high percentage of jobs in the area here where people are working. The home prices, because it's such a high quality of life, has been one of the really difficult things that we've been facing. So I just looked this up last night. I mean, it was like $850 last year. It's up 18% just year over year in terms of housing prices. And this was what Zillow called a typical home. It didn't even say the median price. So you'll see, and for those of you that are not from here, I like to use the phrase, you have to remember this is the California currency, which is a 4-to-1 exchange rate with everywhere else in the country. So I was trying to figure out in a limited amount of time, how do I tell you enough to understand Healdsburg without giving you the long historical diatribe? And so very quickly, I'm just going to give you some of the key points. And what I like to think of what is special about this place is what I call the DNA. There is something inherent in here, whether it's psychic, it's spiritual, or it's just physical, that attracts people who are psychographically, I think, passionate about walkable urbanism, love great towns, love the sociability of it. And so it kind of becomes a self-selecting audience. And it's what makes this place really great, because it continues to evolve in that group. The square is kind of the epicenter of life. The main street, which is right out here, the grain of the community all adds into that. And then the evolution of where we once were. And Eric and Will, who've been here much longer than me on our first panel, will talk more about that. But the evolution of how we got there. So first of all, I love this image because to me, in terms of DNA and setting, and as you look around, this is to me, this kind of describes Healdsburg in so many ways. And so this is from 1982. This is from a Rudant study, which I'll talk about in a minute, was done. And this was somebody, in fact, if you look at everybody familiar with Rudant? It's like the ULI's advisory service panel, but it's more architecturally oriented. So, and if you look at the people that came here in '82, it's a lot of who's who, but then we're just kind of not anybody, but really become pretty high up in their professions. But somebody did this sketch, and to me, let's see if I can get this to work. I love this because it says so much about what is unique about Healdsburg. Hang on a second. There we go. So first of all, you've got 101, which creates this very distinctive edge. And one of the things about Healdsburg is it's the only town along the 101 that is not divided by the freeway. So Santa Rosa, Windsor, Roanoke Park all have the freeway right down the middle, which was kind of a way of, I think, handling circulation. They've actually, for us, it's actually pretty much on the edge of the community as opposed to, yeah, there we go. I got this cool tool now. Come on. On the edge. The other thing that's very iconic, and you'll see it, is Fitch Mountain, which sits over here. So if you look out of that way, and you'll see it tonight from the bar, which is kind of this iconic volcanic tuff that kind of sits and overlooks town, and then the Russian River that moves around the edge of it. And then in the middle of it, you have this very well-defined, because we have a urban growth boundary in the middle here. And all of the towns along here have a number of urban growth boundaries. So there's an urban separator program, which creates that distinctive, almost European quality of driving through the country and then arriving at a town. But I think Healdsburg has that most clearly of all of the towns. The second thing is the square. And if you had a chance to go experience it, there's so many things that are great about the square. Recognized nationally as one of the best squares done. Exactly 1 acre. And if you compare it with Sonoma, because everybody talks about the Sonoma Town Square is 8 acres. So 8 times the size. Doesn't have the same intimacy, does not get the same relationship of retail across the square to retail. So just as a study in urban design and urbanism, street widths, all of that kind of stuff, it's a really magical piece. And it was, when the town was laid out by Harmon Heald, it was his gift to the town, and it really created kind of the focal point and has evolved. We'll hear today about Hotel Healdsburg, which created the west side of the square back in 2001 and really helped finish that off and kind of completed the room, if you will. But it continues, and it's very well programmed and very well used. I mean, it is a classic kind of place where people just go and hang out on a nice evening. It is not this kind of thing where you have to activate it with the business improvement district. It really is kind of the town's living room and lives and works like that. This is the Matheson that just opened, and I put this in here because one of the design dialogues that I mentioned, we had Cass Calder-Smith, who was the presenter in that, and he was the designer for the Matheson, which is this lovely new restaurant. It was this building, it was a one-level building. They basically kept the front, put a ground floor restaurant, and then added 2 more floors above it, set back so you don't really see them from the street, but add a lot more volume. But one of the things that he said was really interesting is he talked about how restaurants have become the new civic square in communities, because it's really the place where it's where people come and go and mix much more than a lot of other kind of uses that you might do. So it's kind of this public-private thing that's happened. And this is right on the square, and one of the things was to create the roof deck that looks over the square. So if you get a chance to go there, it's very cool. It's beautifully designed. It was an enormous fight to get it approved. It was 280 seats, and people felt that was too big for small Healdsburg. But they've done a lovely job of splitting it up. It's not precious. It's not overpriced. It's actually a really lovely place. So if you get a chance to at least go check it out and have a drink, really fun. And then this is the original layout of the town, and you can see there's a granularity, and there's also a quirkiness of the street pattern. And I think you'll see that as you walk around here, because it's what makes it special. It's not the totally legible grid that you might see in some of the early new urbanism where it was almost too dogmatic. This is kind of happenstance, but there's a lot of interesting intersections they had created from that. There's a lot of buildings that take advantage of that. There's a lot of different grain, big lots, small lots mixed into it that really create the opportunities for different kinds of housing. And then there's the main street, and I love this image from David Baker Architects, because this is their projects, Hotel Healdsburg, Harmon House, and H2 where we are now. But this idea, and they'll talk about this kind of surgical intervention of adding 3 hotels over time and maintaining that grain, that uniqueness. And as I go around the country and I show this example, I say, can you imagine if they'd taken a 120-room hotel and put it all on one block, and just kind of cleared out a huge site? But to do this individually is what I think makes it special. There's a lot of other things that they've done very well, but it's really taken the square and the energy of what was happening around the square and started to bring it down the street. And then in this lower corner here is the Mill District where we'll be today, which was part of a long process to try and activate that site, an old lumber mill site, and do it in a way that didn't cannibalize downtown, but was actually additive to town. So just a couple of key dates in the evolution of town. And one of the things that's interesting, and Eric and Will can talk about this, but in the mid-'80s, Hillsborough was kind of a dump. I mean, the square was really raw. And there's over time, there's been a number of what in retrospect and hindsight, kind of a student of watching what happened, I think there were some very smart moves made by leadership. Maybe not so much so as we go forward, as things become more challenging. But the first thing was they created the entire town become a redevelopment district, which was very powerful in California until they got rid of it. But it basically allowed not tax increment, but to capture that marginal uplift in income and put it back into the town in a lot of different ways. So a lot of the improvements and things that you see were a result of the funding that came off of that. I mentioned the RUDAT study, which was done in 1983. And one of the things, because the town was economically distressed, the downtown with a lot of vacant buildings or not great uses around the square. And so they were charged with what's the future of Healdsburg. And they came up with 3 scenarios. One was to be the medical center of the North Bay. The other was to be Silicon Valley of the North. And the third one was to be an agritourism center. And I don't know that in the end they actually said, yeah, that's what we're going to do, full speed ahead. It kind of evolved into the latter and has become the celebrated place that it is, and it was kind of the logical place to go. But it helped coalesce the thinking and the discussion. An interesting thing that I don't know if they'll talk about today, but where Hotel Healdsburg is in the early 90s, a developer brought forward a proposal to put a Kmart there. So if you can imagine if we'd had a Kmart instead of Hotel Healdsburg, what a very different town this would be. And that was one of those leadership decisions where they said, no, we think we can do better. And so it sat vacant for another 8 or 10 years until that happened. But you imagine those kind of pivot points where you make a good decision or not. 2000, not so good a decision. We passed a growth management ordinance, like so many places, because we were growing too fast. And you'll hear a lot about this probably in some of the sidebars, but the short numbers are 30 permits per year for new housing. And now we have we have a housing cost problem, and they still can't seem to connect the dots between those two. 2001, Hotel Healdsburg opens. Celebrated building, great PR team, really puts Healdsburg on the map. 2010, this building opens, same thing, they continue to build the momentum. 2010, at the same time, the city, to their credit, undertook what was called the Central Healdsburg Area Special Study Area. There's another, I got too many A's in there. But the idea was this site where the lumber mill was, they knew was going to be sold, and rather than wait till somebody bought it and came forward and everybody said, no, we don't want that, go back to the drawing board, they created a public process, an RFP, and a master planning process that I was involved in to basically get the community's vision, get it approved, go through the environmental approvals, and then put it out, and then let the landowners bring it to market as they wanted. And so that teed up what has become the Mill District. And Alan Cohen was involved in, he was working with the Mill District, was also involved in some of those early studies. And it really, it was one of those things where the town taking control of its future by going to the community and saying, help us figure out what we want and what we'll allow, and then taking that to the development community rather than development community taking big risks. Now, you'll hear today it still wasn't as easy a process afterwards as it should have been, but at least there was a clarity about what they wanted. 2014, the CHAP was approved, and one of the things that came out of that was that the potential of that site would not become unlocked until the intersection, which you'll see where the roundabout is, was resolved. So it's a 5-point intersection. It's one of 4 in the country that has a railroad track running through the middle of it. And so that actually, the idea of a roundabout started in 2003, and it was finally opened in 2018. Long process because people drink wine here and they don't know how to drive roundabouts, was the general public consent that. Yeah, those were the public outreach meetings I got to run where it's like, really? Have you ever been to Europe? But I was like, oh, nobody knows. So anyways, got built. In fact, the funny thing was we actually did a temporary where we took out the stoplights, put in Jersey barriers, and let people drive it before they built anything. And it was like the day after they did that, everybody was like, why didn't we do this sooner? This works so much better. Because it was really a bad, Alan's house is like overlooks it, so he can tell you about the backups. Harmon Guest House, where some of you are staying, opened in 2018. Just this year, the Matheson and the Montage opened, which is kind of like a whole nother level of play. I left Single Thread out of here. That's a whole nother thing. And then next year, the Mondrona and Mayakama Lodge, which are smaller boutique hotel projects, will also be opening. So there's this kind of inflection point that just continues to roll along here, and that will be part of the backdrop of things you'll hear. I wanted to end on a couple of things and just a couple of high points for me. Some of the good policy decisions that the town made back when it mattered. And the first was when they had the redevelopment agency, they created a parking district, and they used a lot of that money to buy the lots behind these buildings and create parking spaces, and basically said, if you develop on Main Street, you don't have to park. You don't have to park the building. And that's why you have that urbanism, you have that build-to frontage, you have that great kind of active edges along there, because people weren't solving for parking. They could use the parking district. They've since had to update that because it's so successful, and they've kept it where they have a payment in lieu program, which is somewhere between $5,000 and $13,000 a space to buy yourself out. And then there's an annual maintenance fee, and I can tell you more about the details. But I think that was one of those really brilliant moves early on, before people were really talking about parking as a barrier to creating good urbanism. Somebody got it early on. The other thing that they did well, I'm not sure executed well, but they created the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. So there was a linkage between new development and affordable housing, which a lot of cities are trying to do. And typically, those of you in affordable housing know that if you start to try to put that in place when the horse is already out of the barn, it's pretty hard. So I think this has been around for quite a while, and it's worked pretty well. The other thing that they did, which is buried in the code in downtown, is because we have relatively low densities here. Our top density is 20 units per acre, and there's very few sites that have that. It's typically 16 units per acre. But half a unit in certain areas counts, or 500 square foot or less size unit counts as half a unit. So you can effectively double the density if you build smaller. And then they have a transit occupancy tax, which goes on the lodging. And that was put in pretty early on and raises a lot of money. And it funds a lot of things like our Parks and Rec program, I think to the tune of $5-8 million a year. So a lot of stuff, and now some of the affordable housing. The things that were not great policy is, even though they had this parking district, they still have lousy parking standards. And we talked yesterday about the parking minimums versus parking maximums, and it's one of the barriers. It's still pretty high. We'll talk about that out at River House. The Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, well, they put it in place. It was, I think, not particularly great, and it's gotten better, but it was 15%, but you had to start with the very low. So in River House, where we only had 8 units, the 7th unit would have had to be an affordable unit, and it would have had to be very low price. So what we'd pro forma at the time would sell for $900. We would have had to sell 1 unit for $160,000. They've since changed out where you start at either the low or the moderate, and if each of you know the tranches, it just gets, as you go lower, it requires more and more subsidies. So they've modified that a little bit, but they've also increased the percentage. So the mechanism is there. I think they still need to fine tune it. One of the things that I talked a lot about with the council is small projects should be able to, anything under 20 units should be able to have another path to meet this, as opposed to trying to build on site, because it's just very difficult to make the numbers work. Bad policy, the growth management ordinance. I said 30 units per year, you kind of get what that does. And so they've got this great thing in the code where 500 square feet or less counts as half a unit, but it still takes one of those 30 units. You don't get like half an allocation. So it's like, why would anybody build a 500 square foot unit? It makes no economic sense. So you haven't gotten the affordable by design that was intended to create, because you haven't created the mechanism. And then because we're so successful with our hotels, we've decided not to build any more downtown where people can walk places, but we can build them out on the edge. So yeah, go figure that one. So that's. They are excluded from the GMO. So affordable housing and ADUs are not included in those 30 per year. So that's obviously been, a bit of a relief valve for people that want to do that. Okay, quickly, today's agenda. I'm doing a time here. So we got a panel this morning. We're going to do tours. We're going to break into 2 groups because I think it's easier for people to hear that way, and we'll talk a little bit about that right before we leave. We're going to all walking, all within a very short distance. All of this is in your book, the maps. We're going to go, we'll do 2 tours. One group will go to case study, to Alan's place. One will go to the gallery, and then we'll swap places, and then we'll all reconnect at the Mill District. And then we'll do 2 case studies, the Mill District and a little bit of a background on River House. And then we'll go do more walking tours this afternoon. So we'll go through the details of that. We've got 3 that you can pick between. I've also arranged for a shuttle to kind of move around because we've got a tight schedule and have to be at Hotel Healdsburg back at 4 o'clock for the panel that we've assembled there. And then we come up to Harmon House for dinner and drinks. All right. Our panel, is I'm probably running long, so I want to introduce Eric Ziedrich, longtime member here who can talk about downtown and had an illustrious Healdsburg lumber, entrepreneur. Were you mayor or just a council member? Mayor, there you go. Okay, so you got it all. And Will Seppi has one of the really great long-standing restaurants here, Cousteau, and entrepreneur as well, and been very active in the chamber and all things Healdsburg and all the things that we're trying to do here. And then Patrice, where are you? Come on. So why don't you all come on up? You've got your mics. And Patrice, you're going to give us a little bit of Will and Eric. Why don't you guys sit over there? Patrice, you can sit here. You're gonna explain to me what Main Street does, so I don't have to say that anymore. That I like it. I like the idea, but I don't know what it is.
I'm a little bit sad that it's as complicated as it is to explain it. Sorry, I demiked myself here. Okay. Great. Let's see. Morning, guys.
Good morning.
Great to be with you. So, Jim, I want to start by thanking you and for your leadership in making all this happen, and for the gift of your book, which I think has really helped to train focus and attention on a really important topic, which is small-scale development. And of course, and actually, Jim, I think you need a round of applause for all you have done. Okay, so first of all, I don't get out of my house much these days, so this is like a big deal, and I'm silently arranging you all in Zoom tiles to help make myself more comfortable and remind myself that I am capable of talking to a large, a live group of people. But yes, I'm Patrice Fry. I'm president and CEO of Main Street America. I thought what I would do is explain Main Street America to Jim before we get started talking.
You know what Main Street America is.
The problem is it's not the easiest thing to explain, but we'll get to that in a second. And then we're going to go to a conversation with our small business owners, who I understand you're also small business owners and developers, right? Did I get that right? Ish, yeah?
It's debatable, but yeah, we try.
Okay. Well, if there are 2 groups of people that are essential to the health of any Main Street, it's small business owners, more on that in a moment, and small-scale developers, right? It's the symbiotic relationship between those 2 groups that helps create economic opportunity, and it helps create real quality of life. 2 things that are incredibly, incredibly important, regardless of the size community you're talking about. So, okay, a little bit about Main Street America. I'm just going to use this. All right, this is a map of where we serve. So we're the nation's largest nonprofit supporting downtown and neighborhood commercial district revitalization. And what that means is that we have a network of 1,200 main streets. These are professionally run, mostly nonprofit organizations on the ground. And it's their job every day to wake up and support small businesses and support the development community and really make that a better place. And a little bit to know about 70% of our network is in lower moderate income census tracts. So these are some of the most distressed communities in the country. Our network also skews pretty heavily rural. I don't think I'd count Healdsburg as rural, but yeah, about 70% rural, 30% urban. What else can I tell you? We have a reach of about 300,000 small businesses within that network. It's been a super rough year and a half for those small businesses, and I think it makes it all the more important that we're having this conversation this morning. At Main Street, so we're a 40-year-old program, long-standing program, actually started by the National Trust for Historic Preservation when we started to see the hollowing out of downtowns all across the country as people really fled to the urban fringe, right, to the strip malls and to the malls in general. And there was this recognition of there are these incredible assets downtown that are really being left for dead, and Main Street was really organized as a way of helping save those assets. We have done I can't take any credit for this because I've only been with the organization for 8 years, but we've done a pretty solid job of tracking our investment statistics, reinvestment statistics over the last 40 years. There's been about $90 billion reinvested in these downtowns. That's a number that probably seems a little small until you realize, oh, these are really mostly very tiny places, and these are incredibly distressed places, which makes this number very meaningful. About 690,000 net new jobs. The number keeps changing, so I can never remember it. 154,000 net new businesses generated as part of our work in Main Street, and then over 300,000 buildings, and dare I say, mostly small-scale buildings, rehabilitated and put back to work. And of course, the point that I really wanted to make, sorry, these arrows are a little off, so, was that the jobs only happen, the net new businesses only happen because entrepreneurs are willing to, step out there and take a risk and invest in the community and honestly invest in themselves. And the same with those building rehabilitations, that those only happen because of people like you who are willing to take the risk and have a vision for the community and take the risk to make it happen. In order to contextualize the conversation, because I think we're going to chat a little bit about some of the COVID pivots that were required in your business and what that might mean for the future, just wanted to make the very obvious point that it's been a devastating year for a lot of small businesses, or devastating 2 years for a lot of small businesses. So the data about small businesses in this country is spectacularly bad. That's actually one of the very big lessons from COVID, is that we don't understand our small businesses very well. But the best estimates are that about 20 to 35% of small businesses closed permanently during the course of the pandemic. And that is particularly devastating, or it was particularly devastating in communities of color. We saw closure rates, particularly among the African American community and the Latinx community, that were significantly higher than that 20 to 30%. One of the interesting things, and I wasn't exactly sure I would share this slide, but I'll go ahead and do it because I'm still trying to figure out what this slide means myself. One of the interesting things we saw in our Main Street communities is actually that if we surveyed our network in this spring of 2021, and we said, all right, how many small businesses did you have open in January 2020, pre-pandemic, and how many do you have open today? And there was actually oh, sorry, I'm getting a message that I need to talk louder. Okay. And there was actually is that any better? You know what, I'm just gonna hold this. Okay. There's actually a very small uptick in businesses on main streets throughout the course of the year, or throughout the course of the pandemic. And I think this means a lot of different things, but one of the things it points to is the importance of having a really robust support system for small businesses within the local community, which I think serves developers well, but also serves small businesses well. It's not all doom and gloom. We have seen a surge in entrepreneurship unlike any other in the last 6 months, which I think means there is tremendous opportunity for the people sitting in this room. And that gives us great hope that where we do see pretty significant vacancies in some of our commercial districts, there are opportunities to move in there and pretty rapidly fill those vacancies. One of the things that I think may come out in this conversation, and I'll just note here, is that this has been the year or the 2 years of the pivot. Everybody's sick of the term pivot, but it's I think apt. Oh, did I just step in something? All right, somebody can explain this to me later. All right. Suffice to say, the businesses that made it or tried, made it during the pandemic, a lot of them, it was because they adapted. They started selling online. They started offering delivery. They started, making pickup very easy. And certainly, I think that has long-term implications for what businesses need on Main Street. But so too do these other, I think as we see so much retail move online, it only intensifies the importance of things like experiential retail. I heard about my new favorite example of experiential small business, which is chicken and pickle. This is from the Oklahoma City, pickleball and chicken. So that sounds amazing to me. Great example. And this, I actually wasn't going to talk about rentals, but I was going to talk about work from home, which actually has some huge implications for how we develop our commercial districts as well, and the kind of spaces that we need there, because people like me, have started to lose all their social skills because they are in their house, 80 hours a week. So, with that I hope that helps us somewhat as context, and I am delighted to meet you guys, Eric and Will, and hear a little bit about your experience as small business owners in the community. So could you just talk a little bit about how you started and a little bit about your businesses, and just help everyone orient to who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, it all started with my mother and father. And I think they did a pretty good job. I'm a California native, born in San Francisco. Family migrated when I was in grade school up to Santa Rosa, which at the time was a small town. Saw an awful lot of growth in Sonoma County. Not only, it kind of emulated what happened here in Healdsburg, but it just became a place to be. Wine industry was a great influence, telecommunications. South County was big. But I grew up in a family. Father was a general contractor, so I lived and breathed building as a kid. And what I learned was the last thing I wanted to do was enter the trades. Instead, I wanted to sit in an office where it was always temperature controlled and no mud. And so I studied finance and accounting, and ultimately became a financial analyst for Wells Fargo in San Francisco. Then this family business, Healdsburg Lumber, that my folks had purchased earlier, and desperately disliked, by the way, and tried desperately to sell it, and struck out. So the next thing, it's kind of like a Mikey likes it thing. They introduced the concept to Eric of possibly buying the family business, and why not? So that's what we did. And just a segue, Jim's comment about Healdsburg being such an attractive place in the 80s. Well, my wife, who also grew up in Sonoma County, introduced, after we purchased the business and been up here a little while, started looking at real estate. I said, "Dear, what do you think about moving to Healdsburg?" She said, "Not in a million years." No. Ultimately convinced her, moved to Healdsburg, and got very involved in the community with little training or direction, dove into Chamber of Commerce, got on the Planning Commission, school board, ran for city council, became mayor a few times, got bloodied a lot, resigned actually from the city council because of all the adversity over housing and the growth management ordinance that Jim commented on. And during that time, owned the business Healdsburg Lumber, by definition was involved in property acquisition and expansion, and typically you give credit to entrepreneurs and small businesses who have the vision and the foresight to expand and develop the town. Truly, most of it is just a survival instinct. All we're trying to do is hold everything together And sometimes if you stay still, you're dying. You've got to grow. So that's what happened for the last 40 years. And here we are.
Here we are. Here we are.
Will Seppi with Costeau Bakery, and similar to Eric, my story started with my mom and dad. But I'll go back a little bit further than that. Healdsburg, my great uncle's family homesteaded in the 1800s out in West Dry Creek. My great aunt ended up obviously marrying my Uncle George. My mom and dad both grew up in the Pacific Northwest region. I was born in Southern California, and my folks relocated to Healdsburg in the mid-late 70s. When they came here, the town is not what it is today. You'll hear that again and again. My dad hauled hay for Goodyear Haymart when they came into town, and started that. And then they got into a little bit of real estate. Had a company, Healdsburg Realty, at the time, which was located over on Center Street in the Schieffer Building. At that time, things weren't the real estate market that they are today in town. But that same great aunt, my Aunt Mary, encouraged my folks to buy the bakery when it came for sale. And having no experience in the bakery business or restaurant business, they thought that would be the best thing to do. So they got into it. And long story short, John Costeau taught my dad how to bake. My mom sold the product on the front counter. So that was how I was brought up in the business. I've got 3 younger sisters. The bakery itself started 1923, just to the north of its location today. So if you have the opportunity and you're walking up or get up to the 400 block of Healdsburg Avenue, where Vanguard Properties is today, was the site of the original bakery back in the 1923 that started as the French American Bakery. Changed hands, changed names over the years. Ultimately, in 1972, the Costeau, John and Annie, French couple, purchased it, renaming it at the time. So my mom and dad bought the business 1981. At that time, I was growing up here in town. I was going to school over at St. John's, which is just a couple blocks up. As kids, we did not walk across the plaza. It was boarded up, a lot of dilapidated buildings. So we would make our way around town in a different fashion, but going through the plaza wasn't one of the things that we did back then. So quite amazing transformation. This was a gas station, the spot we're sitting in today, not that long ago. And where our building is today, we were flanked by gas stations on both the east side and the west side, where North Street and Healdsburg Avenue come together. In 1989, my folks had the opportunity to purchase the property that we're in, and had also as Jim alluded to earlier, there was the redevelopment money. We participated in that through the facade program. So if you stand in front of our building, you're looking at it, the front facade is all original. And if you were to go pull up some historical slides, or perhaps even go to our website, you'll see pictures of the original building, and you'll see that front facade matches exactly, because it is from the original building in 1920, probably 5-6 period of time. So they remodeled the whole thing. Had to put a 6-foot concrete tube underneath the building because there was open flowing water from Healdsburg Avenue back to Foster Creek out here. That led to some issues with the city of Healdsburg over the time. I don't recall how that was all settled out back then, but so there's been development in our family, small scale, taking the risk, investing in it, right? And we continued on in that location. I grew up in the business, as I mentioned. I went to college on the East Coast. I went as far as I almost could without getting in the Atlantic Ocean, and decided I was not coming back to Sonoma County. I was not coming back to Healdsburg. There's no way this place, I was done with it. Well, 17 years ago, I came back. So in the fall of 2004, I returned. I had started my career in public accounting. I went on to do corporate finance and corporate accounting, transferred from Philadelphia to Palo Alto, and got tired of that rigmarole down there, and quit my corporate job and decided to come back up here. Clearly looking at Sonoma County and looking at Healdsburg and seeing the changes that were happening, there's noted the development of Hotel Healdsburg on the west side of the plaza, and things were changing. So I said, I think there's opportunity to take our business and build upon that legacy, and I'm willing to make a change. My folks were also ready to make a change. They were wanting to be done. They'd always hoped that myself or my sisters would get involved in the business. So made that change, came back, and I haven't looked back since. Today, we have a full-service bakery cafe. We've moved our production off-site. We recognize that producing in downtown Healdsburg in a prime retail location was not going to be the best use for commercial manufacturing, if you will. So we relocated to another location here in town and subsequently have moved our production again out of Healdsburg to just down north of Santa Rosa off of Airport Boulevard. But in doing that, that allowed us the opportunity to remodel in 2008 to come up with the concept that we have today that is full-service cafe. We seat about, give or take, right, 80 some odd people. At that time, one of the larger places to sit in town until my good friend Dustin Villette opened up the Matheson and put his eateries in here recently. That said, we keep moving forward. We have a couple other retail locations throughout Sonoma County that are small. And one of our goals is making small spaces. We believe that one of our core values is community. Firmly believe that bakeries offer that in communities where people can go. They can get a cup of coffee, get a piece of Danish, meet people, have meetings, and are truly a community hub. So as we look to grow our business, we've looked for partnerships, we've looked for properties and opportunities that are small and located in where we believe right locations. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about that as we get through. So long story short, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about not just small businesses, but mom and pop businesses. So truly small businesses, which I think certainly in the communities we work with, those are the businesses of choice. We're not super excited to see chains locate on our main streets. And so why don't you talk just a little bit about sort of what mom and pop means to you, and more importantly, like what is the value you see it bringing to communities? And Will, you already touched on it a tiny bit, but Eric, maybe we'll start with you on this.
Sure. I think mom and pop is a psyche. It's a culture. It's an approach to the community, your clientele, your market. So you don't necessarily need a mom and pop. And I look around in our community, there are businesses that could be national, could be franchises. If they hire the right people and they have the right business plan, and I think it's critical that part of that business plan is that business entity integrates itself into the community, your community over and over it again. They need to pivot into that community. I just threw that out because
You wanted the same reaction?
The pivot really struck your chord a little bit ago. That was kind of flat.
Rework that material.
Yeah, after the meeting. But I think I've seen businesses in town that are not mom and pop, but with the right management staff and the right direction from whoever the parent company might be, they can in fact become a mom and pop. But by definition, those of us that really are mom and pop, this is not just a business. The profit motive doesn't drive us. We join the community. We send our kids to school here. We join the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis Club. We attend church here in town. Every bit of our DNA becomes part of the community. And ultimately, by connecting to the community with that kind of a link instead of just a P&L link, all the decisions we make, by definition, are what is best for the community. Whatever we do that's best for the community, we reap the rewards because the community responds and recognizes that we indeed are part of their life, as opposed to, and we see all kinds of entities, a Carl's Jr., a Safeway, businesses that open up in town, and I don't think any of us who live in this town could probably tell you who the manager is, who the key personnel are. You don't see them at the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis Club. They don't get it. And when they don't get it, they'll never reap the advantages of being a ma and pa and being a member of the community. So it's a critical understanding, and it falls flat with those who aren't in the ma and pa population.
I like that, the notion it's a psyche.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that's it. I mean, the whole being ingrained where you live, and I think that's one of the special things I often share with people here in Healdsburg. You have a tremendous amount of investment that has happened over the last many decades and most recently, but one of the cool things is these people that are putting capital into the community are living here. So they're not just taking it and leaving or pulling it out into some other organization. People have chosen to relocate their families here, to put them in, as Eric said, whether it's the schools or be involved in the clubs, and really stepping up to help guide the community going forward. And I'll step back a little bit too, because I think I want to share with you, life has milestones, right? So when I came back 17 years ago, we had about 20, 25 employees. My dad was still baking. In fact, he baked up till about 12, 15 years ago. One night, I don't know, we had a baker out that was sick, someone on vacation, and the other guy was running late, right? And I was like, oh, this isn't good, right? So I called my dad. I said, hey, no one's here. Can you come help? We need to get started. So run the recipes, and we're down on the production floor, which is very small, about the size of this room or half this, and I'm opening up bags of flour and dumping them in the mixer, right? And as I'm going for like number 2, I'm like, well, this is bullshit, right? This is not what I'm born to do, right? So we're gonna do one thing with this company. We're gonna grow. So, right? So I told Dad, I said, okay, we got through that night, right? But that's not what I went to school for. He loved it. He loved working with his hands. He still likes getting in there and doing that. Not me, right? When the bakers see me coming, they're like, go the other way, right? So, I'm proud of the fact that we've grown our business, right? But that we still have core values that my folks instilled in the company, right? In me, and that essence of community, essence of family. Today we employ, I think we're back up to about 110 employees, right? We've been as high as 150. Last year we laid off 80-something people in 3 days, right? Worst day of my career with the company. But that whole ability to empower people that work for us, to take that ownership, to be engaged in the neighborhoods where we have our retail locations located, to participate in those communities, I think is absolutely the biggest and most critical thing that we have. And the flip side of that is business becomes more complicated regardless of your size. The managerial component was a piece that my folks never had, right? My dad worked the product, my mom sold it. There was no one managing, right? And that's the piece that I brought back into the business. And I think that's one of the things, if I'm critiquing mom and pop or small business, where we struggle is on that managerial side of it. You have passion, you have commitment, you have dedication for whatever you're doing. And probably this past year, right, year and a half, that became even more apparent as people had to go through loan process, the PPP stuff and whatnot, gathering information, not sure what they needed or didn't need, right? I was fortunate with my background to be able to have that information, pull that together, and make it work and able to help other people as well get through a bit of that process. So I do believe it's, as Eric was saying, the essence of what you're going for and the mindset of where you're at that truly gives that mom and pop feeling and strengthens the communities we're at.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and especially the point about the sort of missing managerial piece of it, and I'd love to chat with you offline about sort of education pieces there. So I think this is a question about what could community leaders be doing differently to better support small businesses? And I think for a room full of developers, there's probably plenty of gentle criticism they would offer community leaders on how they run planning approval processes and things like that. But from the small business perspective, what What are your thoughts?
All right, next question.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we just lack, period, right, is leadership, right? The world communities need leaders, right? And I speak with another CEO periodically, and when we're talking to groups of young people, we're encouraging them lead. When you have the opportunity, whatever organization it is, and someone asks you to do something or need a volunteer, just raise your hand, right? Because you're going to learn something through it. And that's one of the things I try to encourage, right, and work with our staff. So you need to lead, you need to step up, and we need that. I think in that context, we lack long-term vision, right? We're so reactionary that we need to have and take the long look at where we're going. And in turn, how are businesses going to support that vision, right? And I think we're so short on whether it's the development fees and banging people, and Eric's going through all this right now, I think, right?
You're correct.
Right? You know, we went through it with the piece of property we bought in Santa Rosa. Write this down, Roseland, right, area. Put that on your notes. Look at it. Guarantee with you in the next decade you're going to find this area of Santa Rosa being one of the most popular up-and-coming areas, and a lot of small development is happening or going to happen down there. So we purchased a building down there, largely Latino community, and we put a branded company in there called Tia Maria, hired people. In fact, yesterday when I was down there meeting with Cynthia, who runs the place, she literally lives 500 yards from the shop. When I was down there, we'd bought it, we were doing the rehab and stuff for it. I was loading the truck, my entrepreneur hat, right? Throwing stuff in the back of the truck, cleaning stuff up. She walks across the parking lot, kind of looks back over her shoulder, and she was with another, Maria, who also works for us. They looked over and looked over. I said, hey, what's going on? They want to know. I said, well, we're going to open this up. They said, oh, we might be interested. I said, well, let's talk. So they both work there. We've been open now 3.5 years. They both have great jobs. They've continued to see their, pay increase. They've engaged in the community. They've had opportunity to be creative and bring in more people. But getting that project done, right, taking a dilapidated building that had ivy growing all over it, right, in an area, it's just a, it's a ridiculous process going through that and the amount of cost involved. And the long-term approach should have been, this is a great project. Let's see how we can get it done quickly or quicker, right? And know that it's going to contribute back to the community for the long term. So,
Will, can I press you for like one or two specific changes that would have made a difference?
Changes, I had to do a traffic study. The building's 1,000 square feet, sits in a corner. That was 3.5, 4 months, I think, that took to get that done. That was following on the fact that the county and the county of Sonoma, the city of Santa Rosa, had been through years in the making of annexing the Roseland district into the city of Santa Rosa and conducted numerous traffic studies themselves that were on record in there. So just, again, a frustration part, right, of being that small business owner, saying, all I want to do is get this done, contribute back to my community, give people jobs, and as Eric said, we're going to survive. We're just going to keep pushing forward through this thing, regardless of what it takes. So there's my one example.
Thank you. Thank you. Eric, what would you add?
I've got a better one. But I'll back up for a minute, because I think you asked what small businesses could do to assist the leaders of a community.
Sure, you can use it. Was more the reverse, which is how could communities be more supportive of, and specifically local city council and local government be more supportive of small business. But I would love to hear your ideas for the reverse as well.
There's an interrelationship there between the community and the community at large and the business community. And as I mentioned, I was on the city council actually 3 terms, so I had to experience this far too often. But even in a small town, there's a definite disconnect between elected officials, City Hall, and the business community. And they rarely, or typically the only time they interact is when the business community needs something, which means you go to the planning commission or the city council and plead your case. And typically the response is, you just selfish motivations. I can read through what you're trying to do. This is just another money-making venture. There's little understanding. And a lot of issues, critical issues that our city council faced over the years, we received very little response. Once again, the small business community, we're all strapped, focused on running our business and just trying to tread water, survive. Typically on a Monday night, we're not really highly motivated to go to a 4-hour city council meeting, have a hearing on something that doesn't relate to exactly what's happening in our life. So we ignore it. The ultimate consequence is that the elected officials have no understanding or appreciation for what the business community is going through, so they make their decisions based upon this tunnel vision, and ultimately do a disservice to not only the business community, but that all percolates down to the entire community. So the gist of my point is that we in the business of development, real estate, and small business, we need to dedicate some time. Part of our job description has to include involvement on the political front and influence and inform. And you're not lobbying, you're just educating the entities that are making the decisions for the future of your town. So I think that's critical, and I pleaded that for years, and frankly, it falls on deaf ears because we all have limited time and limited resources and other priorities. But it has to become a priority at some point for the good of the community.
Yeah, that's a great point, that you don't want your first conversation to be about what's needed. There's the opportunity to build a relationship long before that. Great. All right. Well, you guys have both built very memorable spaces, very successful businesses within the city here. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts or observations, advice you might dare offer this group in terms of thoughts on how to create those memorable places.
Can I do the one-upsmanship on your traffic study?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, yeah.
I have a project going on.
We won't even talk about salamanders yet.
No, but that's good.
Right? Okay.
And they weren't involved in this. But this is relatively recent. Healdsburg Lumber, we are located lovingly. We're not Main Street, unfortunately. Or fortunately, the real estate values don't reflect that or didn't cost us that. But we're in the lovingly referred to Rust Belt area of Healdsburg, which is the south end near the railroad depot. That property is increasing with value for a number of reasons, including its proximity to the Mill District, which is this terrific development project that you're going to hear more about. So we located a site farther out on the outskirts of town and started the planning process. And I was warned, actually, I got called by a city staff person. You're not going to write all this down, are you?
Yeah. Gary.
And said, there is a virtual meeting.
Your political career is over.
I could have told you that anyway. Said, you may want to participate in this virtual meeting tonight. Our brand new city council is making a decision on some of the development fees that the city has had implemented, but they're reviewing them and considering some significant increases. And I said, oh, what fees are they? One was traffic mitigation. And I said, well, that's irrelevant since I'm moving farther out of town. I'm lessening the traffic burden in the town, so that's a moot point, correct? No. No, and he said it has nothing to do with the impacts you have on traffic. It has everything to do with the financial needs of future development for the city. Okay, that's great. And he said they've already got a proposal in front of them, and how will that impact me? Well, right now, today, your traffic impact fee would be somewhere in the order of $15,000. Okay, and what if this thing passes? $125,000. Okay. Anything else? Yes, stormwater. And I said, well, That's irrelevant because we're not even connected. We have our own on-site water retention, and we're all hardscaped anyway. It's the development's all done. So, right, there's no impact. Incorrect. I said, so what's the impact? And I'm not even going to get these numbers right now. Somewhere on the order of 75,000. And if this passes tonight, 275 to 375,000. This is significant dollars. So I attended this meeting and said, do you guys have any idea the impact of these decisions, what it will have on future development in this town? It doesn't make anything financially feasible. And by the way, I submitted my applications for this project 2 years ago, and all of a sudden you're increasing my fees to this level. I said, something's got to give. I've already got bank commitments, da-da-da-da-da. It's a woe is me type of appeal, and I frankly felt guilty and a little inept using that ploy, but that's a fact of life. When you're in the development world, and you start here and base all your assumptions on this project, and all of a sudden you're here with these fees. Anyway, then I got lectured by a member of the council who said, you know, when I enter into a new project, I always set aside a reserve for the unexpected. Okay, that's a good idea. They went ahead, cut this story a little short. They approved all the increases, but thankfully somebody at least delayed the implementation. They were ready to implement it that night, and apparently the ordinance allowed them to do so. The following day, I took it upon myself to talk to this council member that lectured me about these reserves and said, just out of curiosity, what percentage do you set aside on your projects? And he said, well, you know, I don't know. It depends on the project. I said, what kind of projects have you done? Well, I installed a new countertop. And I said, okay. I said, well, how do you feel about 573% increase in fees? Or, I'm sorry, 573% increase in fees. How do I reserve for that? Is that a reasonable allowance? And he said, you know, it's been very good talking to you, and I look forward to discussing this in the future. That was it.
Oh my God.
So I guess it's just, remember, we need to educate our decision makers far before you find yourself in the front of the podium at the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's an extraordinarily important point.
Did I beat you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm looking at time, and Jim, I'm realizing I don't know if this ends at 9:45 or 10 or.
No, it doesn't end at 10. Ideally, we can wrap up by 9:40.
Okay, great.
We can grab some more coffee.
So I'm in.
Use the restrooms before we hit. We need to be at our next destination at like 10.
Excellent. All right. Well, so with that in mind, and I'll leave a little bit of time at the end in case there are any questions. But let's talk about any business model modifications you might have made during the pandemic. You'll notice I'm not using a word. So, because, well, in all seriousness, I think it's a good chance for us to think about, all right, how are small businesses changing in response to new consumer trends, et cetera, and what might that mean in terms of small scale development? Anything come to mind for either of you?
Well, this is a good question because we're polar opposites, I think, in the impact of COVID for each of us. So I'm a building material retailer. After the initial shock, and we had to reduce hours for a few days and had a few employees that came down with COVID. So there were those kind of responses that we had to develop. But very, very early on, we were named a non-essential business. So we were hunkering down due to all the uncertainties of COVID, but that was our basic response. We remained open every day, and in very short order, within a few weeks, everybody probably in this room understands that with everyone working from home, construction being essential, construction activities skyrocketed. So our response was to deal with a significant increase in business volume and rapid inflation with all building material commodities. So that was a challenge for us. Thank goodness. It was a nice challenge to have, but a totally opposite from someone in hospitality or lodging. So maybe.
Just real quick, I mean, I thought I had a diversified company until March 17th of 2020, right? Big piece of our business is on the wholesale side where we distribute to food service. So around here, March 17th, the orders came out and almost every food service operation came to a grinding halt. So that was about 70% of our company. As I mentioned earlier, we laid out about 80, 85 people over the course of 3 days and went from producing 7 days a week to less than 3 days a week and went into just a very, very, very conservative spot from production standpoint, fiscal standpoint, and there was a resolve, the tenacity, we're going to make it through. That was our attitude, but nevertheless, it wasn't without its, still isn't, right, without its challenges. So persevered and continued to do that. We invested a tremendous amount the last 18 months in technology. Recognized that we've got to continue to go that way. We'd already been doing it, but pushed it forward even more. We have since then revamped our operating hours. We've minimalized or reduced, I should say, our SKUs that we produce and our offerings from a menu standpoint if you're coming in. And we spent a lot and invested in employees over the last period of time too. A tremendous amount in additional training. We pushed forward with some other external audits, food safety audits and whatnot that were pending, and we utilized that time to move forward with those. Today all of our operations are back open. They have different hours, they have different things going on, but we continue to put one foot in front of the other. We looked for different channels to move product through, and we continue to pursue those. What else? I think those are probably the top things, but just learn every day some new things and keep going, keep going.
All right, well, last question, then we'll turn it over to the audience. And this is an easy one, I think. What, if you had one place to visit locally that you think kind of captures the spirit of the city, where would you send us?
You're going to hate my answer. If you want to understand the city, you can't limit yourself to one place. I would say you better use the shotgun approach because... John and Zeke's,
Duke's.
I take it back, yeah, a bar.
Right.
Yeah,
there you go.
But kind of similar to our conversation earlier, there are just so many different facets of our community. And I think over the last 10 years, even Jim alluded to it, we've become fractionalized with a number of different elements in our community. And if you limit yourself to one place where that certain segment of the community tends to congregate, you're going to think that's the community. That's how you define the community. So if you don't hit this segment, plus this segment, plus this segment, you won't have an understanding. You'll be blindsided if you ever have to make a decision or respond to what you think that community is. So don't limit yourself to one place.
Don't limit to one. Okay, so in that spirit, where would you send us?
John and Zeke.
John and Zeke, yeah, no.
I would say, I would start at the Healdsburg Museum.
Yep.
Okay.
The community, of course, is people. So where did we come from, and what do we hold in highest value? You're going to see that at the little old museum.
You're also going to get a phenomenal perspective this evening when you're upstairs at Harmon, right? And make sure that you take time to go all the way around their outdoor patio, because you're going to get a view to the west of Dry Creek, hang on the edge, look at the roundabout as you enter town. You can look towards Fitch Mountain. You'll take all that in. And I agree with Eric, right? And I have friends that visit town often over the years, and it's not one thing, right? It's the collective whole that has made Healdsburg such a great spot. And I know you're getting on shuttles perhaps, but if you can, we're not that big, right? So if you want to walk, I encourage you to walk. And not only walk and observe, But talk to the people, right? Put your head in a shop, ask them a question. Stop if you're going to go down one of the residential streets. I would encourage you, walk down Matheson, go down Tucker, go down North Street or Piper, because you're going to see the development that existed there, originally, and you're going to see single-family homes of various sizes. You're going to see multi-unit places, and that is all, what has created this community. We don't have a strict section of this is just one type of development that's gone on in the original framework, and I think that truly is what gives Healdsburg its uniqueness. And Jim put that slide up there of the layout, but don't only walk, but talk to the people. Ask them why they moved here, how long they've been here, right? And I think you'd be hard pressed not to have a great conversation with anyone that you run into.
We can give you a list of names too.
Yeah,
right. What was the name of the bar?
John and Zeke's.
There we go. Great. Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Okay, here we go. Right time.
Yeah.
Teresa, you touched on the idea of education. Who should be doing this education? Like, to give you an example, I'm from back east, like you will, and back there, I was with AT&T for 20 years. What do? As soon as you get a new FCC commissioner, bring them in. Explain the business. This is a politician, no technical background. Sit them down for a week, and they're willing to do it, to really understand what you do. Now, is that the role of the Chamber of Commerce or some other club to put together a literal backgrounding education system? As what are the pros and cons, costs, advantages of what we're doing versus what you're proposing? And let's come to some understanding of each other. Who does this?
I'll give you $5 later for that question.
Okay.
Great question. No, I didn't tee this up for you. I also, my other hat, I'm the chair of the chamber board this past year. And one of the things that we've done that has been a remarkable program is we take about every, I'll say once a quarter, maybe a little more frequently, we take city management and our elected officials out on what we call chamber business walks. So we can take up to 2 city council members. We've got 5. We can't have 3 because of rules and regulations, whatever. So we get 2 of those. We get the city manager, and if another city staff or management's available, we'd love them to join. And what we do is we take them to the businesses, right, and engage with the owner, right, or executive of that operation. And we have introduced. What Eric was talking about a little bit earlier, we have introduced them or opened their eyes to businesses they didn't even know existed, right? They didn't even know had connections or the volume or the what was going on. So I think that's been a very, very powerful thing that we've done. It doesn't cost any money, right? It costs a little bit of time. We've then, if time allows, we followed that up with a lunch afterwards. We start at 10 o'clock, we end about 1. And we allocate about 30 to 45 minutes to it. So I feel that's a role. So for those of you that are involved in organizations in your community, whether it's a chamber or something else like that, I think that's a great way to go about it. I don't know. And then from an education standpoint, the other side, I mean, as a business owner, I take on a lot just to educate my own employees and encourage them to be engaged and participate in various organizations as well. So.
And Gary, an addendum to Will's answer, I think our problem is trying to assign that responsibility to somebody or some entity. I think it's all our jobs. Every business owner, every developer, we should all be taking council members out to lunch, planning commissioners out to lunch, bribe them under the table if necessary. But just get to know them.
It didn't work for me.
No.
Those 6 croissants I donated didn't get me on the planning commission. No.
No, but the point is that if we, too frequently, we assume somebody else is going to take on that responsibility. And kudos to the Chamber of Commerce for taking this on, because for years they didn't get involved politically because of the downside risk, the perceived downside risk. But thankfully they're doing that. But again, I think every organization, every entity should be taking on that responsibility as part of their life to educate those that are desperately in need of it.
Great point. In the back, way back, can't see you.
When you guys are doing that, could you talk about, other than fee exemption, could you talk
You know, my background is finance and accounting, and the projects that some of you may see today all have a similar note of total lack of preparation financially, logistically. It was seat of the pants, shoot from the hip, and I never learned. Usually it's emotions and impulsiveness that drives me to jump into a project, and I'm typically ill-prepared and pay for it later.
I won't show you.
All right.
I think one of the other things I would just encourage, is stakeholders, right, in the various areas that you're in. I mean, if you're able to engage with them and get buy-in, again, community buy-in to support the project, I think that's also one of the things that, despite how long things take sometimes to get done, Healdsburg's been very fortunate to have great developers come in and take their time and do the community engagement and find out how do we come up with great projects for town. So I think that's a piece that, as you're working with businesses and whatnot, is to encourage them to have those conversations and get people. The more people know, the more they're on the side, the more they'll support that project.
Great. Okay.
Is there anything in your experience, two-part, it's just if planning department or city council, planning commission had done one thing differently, would it maybe? I mean, the planning workshop process, which I guess are they still doing that? It was the commission workshop. I mean, you didn't get an opportunity to use that, did you, Eric?
One stop?
Not the one stop, the planning, the workshop process as opposed to the whole gauntlet.
When the city got the idea that they should implement a fee structure with the workshop, correct, no. That was the worst decision that I think they made. Probably Alan can weigh in on that too. But the workshop is supposed to be this collaboration of just no preparation, sit down together and share some ideas, get some feedback as a developer, get some feedback from the decision makers, what will best fit the needs and the direction the city's going in. And that was an opportunity lost when they started attaching fees to that. So that would have been a great benefit. And I think there's discussions about re-implementing that.
We'll go to the middle and then the front here. Go ahead.
I love what you guys did. I've been to Healdsburg several times before. It's not my first time. And I love what it is and how we're going to gather. And I think, and hearing what you're saying, it sounds like, what I find myself thinking about, how does what you've done successfully translate to all the other small towns? Not everything is a Healdsburg with access to the money of San Francisco and the wine business. But I'm wondering if you think that what you've done, your method, would translate across all the different economic scales of small towns. It sounds like your method was very successful. A lot had to do with all the various important parts of community input and chambers of commerce on one hand and everyday Joe people on the other and all that kind of stuff. But how do you see it translating to where everybody else is in this country that isn't a Healdsburg with the kind of money that's here?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to the aspect of community, right? And I think that's, to me, the underlying thing of all this is how do you build that and figure out what you're trying to create and giving that sense of it. And that, I mean, we're fortunate we have that, I believe here, a very strong sense of it. You'll hear some people say, oh, this town's gone to hell over the years and blah, 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 whatever. It's much better, right, than it was decades ago. But I think that, to me, is a piece that I would encourage you as you go back into your communities, right, is figuring out, how do you build that sense of community, right? I mean, we are a small town. You looked at the numbers. We're 12,000 people. It's small. It's a great asset. In my business, it's also a massive challenge, right? We are volume-based. We make money off of pennies. If my company was based down in Southern California, there's bakeries that are our size that, they've got population, 3-4 million people that they're distributed into. We have, 500,000 people here in Sonoma County and 1 million something in North Bay. That's a big challenge for us. So we're constantly trying to figure out how do we keep the business going based off the business model and the product mix that we have. But I go back to that aspect, I think, of community. For me, it's the biggest piece. It's the biggest piece.
I would say a takeaway is probably don't emulate us, because what we've done is very unique and specific to Healdsburg. So be true to your community and respond to what your community members are asking and what direction they want to go in. Jim had made a comment about the RUDAT study in Healdsburg back in 1982. There was a follow-up. There was some, I wouldn't call it distress, but some concerns within the community of where we're going. Once RUDAT was implemented to a degree, we were just kind of floating out there, and it was the editor of the local paper in the early 90s that organized a Chautauqua up at the Villa and got elements and representatives from virtually every aspect of the community. I'm guessing there's probably 70 or 80 people, and it was a 2-day event that was orchestrated to share everybody's dreams, visions, wants, needs, and the outcome was this outline of where we wanted to take our town. And I think every town, if they had a similar type of event, they can't take the outline that we completed on Sunday afternoon. They've got to come up with their own and then be responsive to it. Don't let it die. Don't put it in the archives.
Love the Chautauquas. Lots of fun. One last question, and then we'll try and keep this brief because we're already over.
So quickly, your suggestions on how to educate the public on the process of these projects. A lot of times, they see new development coming in, and the automatic answer is no. So how to engage them early in the process and really partner with the community, I guess.
Early in the process, I think, gets started before the process ever begins. And I look at some of the successful projects in Healdsburg, and Mill District is one that I think has done a fantastic job. But they were setting the table before there was ever really a conversation about what their project was going to entail. Getting to know all the right people, sharing thoughts, ideas, hosting forums to find out what the community is looking for and needing, neutralizing the opposition before the opposition ever has an opportunity to organize themselves. I think that's the key.
All right, we're going to end it there. Excuse me, end it there. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Okay, back on. Good. So thank you, guys. And all moments of brilliance deserve a T-shirt. So there you go. Couple of quick things. So we're going to see you this afternoon at 2, and you want to just talk real quickly about what we're going to see, because so it's the Fog Belt Brewing, your shipping container / Fog Belt, and everything else.
Yes, you're going to see it's a project in process. It's a construction zone, so you're going to get muddy. But this is it started out as a hospitality venture near the old railroad depot here in Healdsburg. It was going to be a coffee stop. Renovated a caboose, and then in the process of constructing a shipping container, bar, comfort food, brew pub. And it has now taken 6 years. In fact, I think your slide, something to do with passion and slow.
Yeah.
I'm a master of slow in this project.
And passion.
But it's a fun project. And that area, our lumber yard is actually across the street from that. And there's another building just to the east of that, Old Roma Station. I think we could walk around that too, which is a project that we redeveloped, old ag building in the early 2000s.
So great. Well, thank you for teeing that up. I just wanted, because that's not covered in the book. So here's what's going to happen. We have to be at our next stops at 10 o'clock, so we've got a few minutes for you to, again, stop the restroom. You can't leave anything here because this is the last time we're going to be in this room. So take whatever you need if you need to run up to your room. But we're going to break into 2 groups, and I think the easiest thing to do if we can is just kind of like divide right down the middle, few of you that are in the back there need to join this group just to balance it out, but roughly 25, 25. Alan, where's Alan? Okay, Alan, say hi to Alan. Alan's going to take the first group over to his, it's 205 Center Street, it's in the book, it's his home and studio, really cool space. There's a lot of great questions about being a small developer and an architect, those of you that are architects wanting to transition, a lot of wealth of information there. Alan's going to take you through his house. I'm going to take the group literally 50 feet across the street to Paul Modern Gallery. We'll hear the story from Paul, kind of walk through the space, really cool adaptive reuse of one of these old Quonset huts into an art gallery. It's actually one of the few double Quonsets, so it's actually just a beautiful structure in a very minimalist way. And then at 11 o'clock, we'll switch places, or about 10:45, we'll switch places. So the group that starts at Allen's will come to the gallery, and the people at the gallery will go to Allen's, and then we'll finish up and we'll walk across the street and across the railroad tracks. There's no trains running, so it's a good thing. Into the back door of the building,
40 or 50
where we'll have
years.
lunch and a couple of presentations, things like that. So again, and then we're going to be walking and everything, and we're going to end the day back at the Hotel Healdsburg. So we'll be out and about. Bring your maps if you can. It'd be really good to have. And I think that's everything for right now. So thank you all.